Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Today is a very special episode here on Anatomy of Movie. We are doing our 400th episode, and we bring it full circle because we're doing Pacific Rim Uprising. Ironically enough, the first Anatomy of a Movie ever was Pacific Rim, so it's very near and dear to our hearts. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk. We talk movies. And now, here's Popcorn Talk's Anatomy of a Movie.
That's right. Celebrating our 400th, we have Marisa Serafini.
Hello, everyone.
We have Demetri Panos.
Yay, 400. Hey, movie fans.
And I'm Phil Svitek. And it's Pacific Rim Uprising. So much to talk about. So much to dissect. And if you haven't seen it yet, we just did an interview with Nick Tarabay, who's also in this movie and a lot of other great projects. So if you're curious for that perspective, definitely check it out. Couple things out of the gate. If you're joining us for the very first time, where were you the 399 other times?
Right.
It's okay. You got started late. Hopefully you'll join us in the future for movies that you see. If you're rejoining us, well, welcome back. Good to always have you. We are spoiler-filled in the sense that we assume you've seen the movie. We're going to talk about various major plot lines. We're going to talk about the behind-the-scenes aspects, and basically everything there is to making a movie. The promotion, the box office, and so forth. It's not your average critic review show. And last but not least, if you want to follow along, if you want to get all the details, all you have to do is go in the description box. There's a PDF link. You click that, you get all of our research all in one place, so that way you can just see it all there for yourself. Without further ado, though, let's get into overall thoughts for Pacific Rim. Marisa, kick us off.
Well, this was a fun movie, and like much to all of us, we really liked the first one, so I went into the second one with the high expectations as well. It was still fun. It was entertainment, popcorn talk. There was good moments of drama, good moments of levity, good action throughout. Overall, it was a fun, entertaining movie, and I liked it.
Awesome. Demetri?
Well, first, I just want to say thanks, folks. I mean, 400 episodes. That's a lot of movie watching. And starting off with the original Pacific Rim, I mean, I remember that day and being invited to come on board. So thanks you, our audience. It's been an amazing 400. So to 400 and plus more, to infinity and beyond,
yes,
as some character says. So going back to Pacific Rim, the original, that was Guillermo del Toro's like homage and love. He was showing his love for those monster movies, the Kaiju movies, Godzilla, Mothra, Gamera, and such. And it was all up on screen. And I think, you had Idris Elba. It had a lot of heart to it, right? Because of his love of watching these B movies. And so going into Pacific Uprising, I'm watching this going, wow, they just made the movie that Guillermo del Toro would go watch that inspired him to make Pacific Rim, if that makes any sense at all. And because it was that B movie with its twisting plot lines and, zany character takeovers, which we can go into more. And it had more Jaeger, more Kaiju. It was just like watching, like, you see a movie like Godzilla, and you go, okay, Godzilla or King Kong, that's a great movie. And then all the sequels after it are cheesy, fun B movies. That's what I looked at Pacific Rim Uprising, was that cheesy, fun B movie that I had a really good time. It never overstayed its welcome. The special effects were fun. The characters were fun. John Boyega is great, but I also love the little girl. She was fantastic in this movie as well. And at the end of the day, I had a good time. So it was fun.
That's always important. I echo everyone's sentiment, and for the most part, I'm not understanding why it doesn't have a higher IMDb score. I don't get it. I think people are, in particular, nitpicking too many things. I think it holds up. And one of the things I appreciate about it, it didn't try to re-explain it, just took the concepts of the first one and built upon them and made it fun. One of the things I will The only misstep I have that I think didn't work with this movie was the promotions early on. I was kind of questioning, wait, did I really love Pacific Rim based on this? Is this just another Transformers movie? And so in seeing it, I'm like, oh no, this is not Transformers at all. I very much appreciate it, and had the trailers been a little bit better, I would have even been more excited to see it. And so there's my thing to you. If you have yet to see this movie, and if maybe you are turned off by the trailers, don't be, because I promise you, it's not Transformers.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I've really got not a whole hell of a lot against Transformers movies, but they made this movie. Well, they made this movie look like a Transformer movie, and I do agree with you. Like, they didn't have to. So I don't understand the decision behind that, because they didn't promote the first Pacific Rim movie that way, but this one for sure looked like, from a trailer standpoint, it just looked like a Transformer knockoff.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't say necessarily knockoff, but I can understand why you say that. I got a lot of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers feel into this movie as well. Awesome, fun show. But what I think is like the tone of this movie is completely different from the first one. The first one, and I rewatched the trailer actually for the original Pacific Rim, it was more darker, it was more dramatic. And this one is like the clear opposite of what the first one is, just in tone-wise. It's lighter, it's funnier, everything takes place during the day, so it dramatically has a different feel than the first one, even though the concepts are still the same.
Mm-hmm. Well, Guillermo del Toro, he was originally wanted to do a sequel and so forth, and then a couple of things happened. Legendary was sold off to a Chinese group, the Wanda Group, and furthermore, he had a little passion project that he wanted to do, which was The Shape of Water. And so the combination therein caused it to be as such that we got somebody else. Now, through a very, as I understand, a very rigorous process, and you would imagine that it would be because the love that Del Toro put into the first one, he wanted to find an heir apparent to him for these movies. And it turns out Stephen DeKnight ended up being that man. I mean, as far as his claim to fame, as it literally says in our notes, all of Marisa's shows.
Yes.
Whether it's
Well, like he's in for Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Angel, Smallville. Two of those are my top favorite shows. Buffy and Smallville are amazing. But like, and he has a lot of work in television and Spartacus as well. So like he knows sci-fi. He knows good action / humor / drama. You know, like he's very familiar with those genres. So it just makes, he took his television background and experience and just transformed it, pun intended, onto the big screen in a bigger production, such as this one.
Absolutely.
And I think overall it worked well. I appreciated his approach where they spent 2 weeks almost like in a writer's room. And the cool part being half was TV writers, half was film writers. And I think that created a good blend of things, because one of the things we talk about is when it comes to writing these days, for movies, because TV's so amazing and so forth, they've kind of stolen all the writers' rooms in a sense, and now it's a singular person writing movies, and I think that does a disservice to the movie. You know, all the great movies in the past had writers' rooms.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So
yeah, and the other thing too, you mentioned TV. Within the past, let's say 10 years, something crazy has happened to TV where it became very serialized. Where before individual episodes, like, TV stood on individual episodes, right? And it wasn't until, like, even when you look at the original Star Trek and Star Trek The Next Generation, each episode, there are some episodes that were two-parters that led into each other, but very singular episodes. Even your sitcoms were very individual episodes. And it was shows like Babylon 5, which started to serialize, and then, of course, Lost really became very entrenched, and you had to watch this episode to get the next episode because they went right into each other. So the writers' rooms for television have become huge because they have a through line. They have like an A to B to C that they have to get to and figure out how to get to it. And you're right, Phil, I agree. I think that because of that, you're writing a movie is very different. I always say it should be approached by write one good movie. And if that movie takes off, then you start thinking about your sequel. But the danger is that a lot of studios are just looking for the next cinematic universe and the F word, which I'm saying franchise. So they're not thinking of trying to do a one-off and then make it succeed. They try to, we need to meet 10 of these, so that's what we're thinking. So they're trying to bring that serialization concept to cinema. And there's always been sequels. Let's not, kid ourselves. But they're not trying to focus on making one real good so that we can have sequels to follow it. You're right. They should have bigger writing rooms for that. But Stephen DeKnight knows how to do this. And he loves the genre. And you can tell.
Absolutely.
You can tell watching Pacific Rim Uprising. He had a lot of fun.
Also, the good thing about this movie, it does feel very self-contained. It is like essentially one long episode, and even the characters, they did a good job of developing them a little bit, and they're new. They had some backstories, and you can see the times that they interacted with each other, eventually building that chemistry that usually would take years in a television show, but they did it in enough amount of time to get to our, climactic action scenes in the end where everyone starts working together.
Right.
And that was a big point of his, whereas before you had the different factions of the world. This time he wanted the fighting core really be a global phenomenon in essence, and the best of the best, whether you're American, English, Chinese, South American, doesn't really matter as long as you're a good fighter and you're compatible, which is a big component from the first and even now, then it works, right? And all in all, if you really think about the amount of stuff they managed to put into this movie, it is quite incredible, and still, overall, less than 2 hours.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see movies like of that caliber going for 2.5, and feeling too long, but what I appreciated was all masked under this action. And the action drove the emotion and vice versa. Right. I really appreciated that right from the beginning. We're put into this world, and let's use this as a jumping off point, right? It's also the beginning of the movie, so it works out well. A lot of whether Marvel movies and DC movies, they've kind of tried to speak to now the actual real life damage of superheroes or whatever you want to call it, and they try to address that. Well, what I appreciate about this movie is it does it in a far more humane way of like, wow, this is how we're living in this filth, this is the actual the result of everything that has happened with the Kaiju and the Jaegers, and yeah, the place is a crap hole.
Yeah, the aftermath, and it's taken us this long to rebuild.
So it did a good job of world building it, and we're set 10 years after the fact. So
and above and beyond that too, it isn't just like the architecture. It isn't just like the buildings and the cities and such. It's the characters. We have Boyega's character as being the son of Idris Elba, who's left in this disenfranchised world that has to rebuild. And who has a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, So from that too, there's a character building to introduce this new character, and how is this person getting along in this post Kaiju world, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, and even his character, being the son of an already authoritative commander that did so much for the first film. And yet we only got a reference to him, and Idris Elba did a great job playing his role, but and we've seen that trope before, always being the son of a famous commander or a famous leader, whatever. But I did like John Boyega's character of Pentecost because he was fun. He had moments of humor, but then also there was some dramatic, slight backstory, but he was still super likable throughout the entire film.
Absolutely.
You can follow him as the protagonist in this movie.
Absolutely. I want to give you a quick moment to explain what Pentecost really means, because it's quite symbolic of what you just described.
It is. And this is very true to our very first Pacific Rim, where I'm talking about the symbolism. But Pentecost, there is a religious term, Pentecost. It's the Christian festival celebrating the descent of the Holy Spirit on the disciples of Jesus after his ascension, which is 7 days after Easter, which in real time is actually coming up pretty soon for us at the time we're dissecting this movie in the year.
How serendipitous.
Very serendipitous. But the meaning of Pentecost is like that second rebirth. So symbolism to Jake, like
Right.
he was already there at one point. He left, and this is his quote unquote second chance at redeeming himself. Whereas Pentecost, just the meaning is like that second descent upon something to like embed or enhance the world. So I found that actually, very interesting and symbolic.
Yeah.
I did too, and what I appreciate, there's this tension of we still have to keep training. We have the academy, which we don't see a little bit till later, but also there's this feeling like, okay, we're done with the kaiju. We've closed off the gap essentially, and so you're kind of always in that weird bubble of like, are we safe? Are we not? And I appreciated that there was that tension and the different politics that went into all of it. It felt, because of the characterizations of having so many people represented, it was a very good political viewpoint from everyone's perspective, and I appreciated that.
Yeah, and it was also about like, corporations coming in, and setting the rule, or setting. I mean, there was a lot of themes. You had corporations coming in who wanted to take the Jaegers out of the human mix and do it all radio remote controlled, basically, because they think it would be more efficient that way. So you had that politic going on. Are we safe? Do we still need the Jaeger program, so to speak, and have it beefed up? So these are all fun topics and themes that can help carry a sci-fi movie of this ilk. And I think that they did a really decent job of it. And I like the characters. Again, Boyega's character, he was a teacher. He was in that base, but he just couldn't live up to his dad's. He couldn't live under that shadow. And so you understood why he left. But you also, the way he portrayed him is that he sort of kind of misses it. He knew that he needed somebody to tell him that he could do good and that he would be great at it. And that was his journey, so to speak.
Well, part of the whole thing is that underscores it. You have to be compatible with somebody, and he could have been compatible with a number of people, whether Eastwood's character or whether Amara, but it was more so the fact that for a long time, he felt like a lone wolf.
Right.
And you cannot be a lone wolf when it comes to a Jaeger. You just can't, by definition. You have to be compatible with at least one person, let alone three on this or two others on the very special one that has 3 operators.
Right.
So I appreciated that about him and his search for that, and sort of reconciling with the notion that, this is something that I can be good at, and that there is in a sense, there's a balance to it where I think he realized just the truce he made with Lambert of like, hey, you do by the books and I'll back you up type of thing. And so at least they got to that middle ground in the middle of the movie.
Yeah, and I'm glad it didn't take them the entire movie to finally get along.
Oh, you and me both.
Yeah, because that could have been forever, where it's like, just get to it.
Tiring.
Yeah, it's just like, and we've also seen that in so many movies and television shows where it takes the 2 main characters that have to work together a long time to finally get to that middle ground. I'm glad they resolved that pretty quickly, because you can tell that they were friends at one point, that they did respect each other. Even when they didn't like each other in the movie, like, you can tell they still respected each other and their duties and what they had to offer to the students and just to the program in general. But like, they were also fun banter back
Yeah.
and forth too.
Agreed.
And it's like, and you'd like to think that you're supposed to hate Nate Lambert just because he's the sterner, you're more stricter, authoritative figure. But no, I mean, he's just doing his job too.
Mm-hmm.
What did you guys think about the love triangle when it came to them? I mean, that was, if anything, that was the thing that I felt was a little shoehorned in there. But
Right. It was totally not necessary because they didn't even really, see that storyline through. So why even put it in?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of, that she was going to end up with Nate. She's Nate. But I agree, it was sort of kind of shoehorned in, and it didn't need to be. I mean, it's not like if they wanted to saddle up Jake with somebody, I mean, it could have been somebody else if they wanted to do a romantic thing, but it wasn't really necessary.
But I'm surprised you say that it was Nate, because I felt there was this initial feeling that Nate was going to be the one to end up with her. But just the way she kisses both of them at the end, she kisses them both exactly the same. It would have been one thing if she kind of kissed him on the cheek and then just laid one on Nate, and it's like, okay, got it, end of joke. Mm-hmm. But
it
yeah.
ultimately didn't go anywhere, so it's like, why even put it in? Maybe for a good laugh, but it's already forgettable.
Yeah. And she wasn't a bad character, Jules. I mean, I liked her as a character, like, alone, what she can contribute. But, it was just...
I would have liked to see her contribute more, like, take those moments out and instead have her contributing more so. And even, if you want to go cliche, that's fine, too, in the sense of, hey, Nate, Jake, just start getting along. And it's like, oh, okay.
Grow up.
Yeah. And she could be that. But you kind of had that in a sense with the sister, right? With Jake's sister and that love that they had for each other, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
If they're, all out of all the strong moments in the movie, I thought that in particular, that bond, and then the way they try to save her and the way that action sequence goes, it's Australia, right? In Australia?
Yeah.
The way it goes, I thought that was very powerful, both emotionally and action-wise scene.
I mean, I completely agree, and also it was just a pivotal scene too that helped get Jake off of his ass, essentially, and him to finally take this role seriously. It's like, no, I came back for a purpose, and it's to help save everybody, because I couldn't save my sister, but I can help save the world. It gave him that motivation. Unfortunately, sometimes you need that tragic thing in your life that gives you motivation to do something good. And I felt like that was the moment that really got Jake to be like, all right, I'm in it.
Yeah, I actually like that brother-sister dynamic that they built. And I'm a big fan of that Rinko Kikuchi. I said that from the first Pacific Rim. A very attractive woman, and she was great. I was bummed. I was like, no, come on. They're not going to kill her off. I was like, it's like,
they did.
she has more to do. She's a really good character. I really like her. So, and I liked how they shot that as well, trying to catch the helicopter, doing his best to save. And once that crashed, it was like, oh, nope, you can't walk out of that one. And I really did. I was like, oh, I'm bummed, because I really enjoyed that character a lot from the first one, because she had so much. When you learn her backstory and how she was saved by Idris Elba and essentially and effectively becoming the half sister of Jake, you could see that they really did care for each other as characters. In any case, in Uprising, and I was sort of kind of hoping that bond would last, but obviously you wanted the relationship too with Amara.
Well, the consolation prize, she did have more to do. Her last final act was in sending them the information that they needed to move forward. So there was that consolation. However, I don't disagree with you for the simple fact, up until I appreciate it as her character, and maybe this is me being shallow, but like the other female character that was Asian that we had at the moment was just being made out to be pure evil.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I just needed a counterbalance of those sorts to be like, okay, I can't take you at the moment. and if this is what I'm left with, I don't like it. Which leads to a greater point. What did you guys think of that? I don't want to call it a bait and switch, but in essence, they kind of played this hand of, isn't she evil? Isn't she evil? And then, boom, Charlie Day's character is actually the one that screwed her over.
Yeah, well, I found it very, again, it just goes to that corporation. You thought that she was this corporation takeover kind of person. You did think that she was evil because she's head of a corporation.
And she knew all the information that the audience didn't know.
Correct.
You knew something was up. She was doing something corrupt.
Right. And I think as the movie goes along, she has that self-realization of, well, I need to get into this fight. I'm going to help to do whatever I can. And I sort of liked her character change. My pet peeve of the movie was the Charlie Day character. I mean, that's B-movie schlock, like right there. Yeah. I've been taken over by the overlords, and that's like almost like right out of Howard the Duck. And I'm gonna take over the world, and you can't stop me. And he's trying to fight, and that to me was like, okay, this is the B-movie schlock part of this movie. And
but I understood it more. Sorry, I'll go to you in 1 second, Marissa. I understood it more rather than just reopening the gap and just And
I get that, but that's the thing. Like, they still ended up reopening the gap, even if it was for a couple seconds. My problem is, Charlie Day was my biggest problem with the first one. His character was so over the top and just so ridiculously out there. You're like, just shut the F up. And he was annoying. And like, and I get he was the comedic character in the first one. He's still the comedic character in this one. But his character was, you can't take him seriously. And so when they made him the quote-unquote bad guy, I still couldn't take him seriously. And like every time he had like a demand for like, let's get this guy even bigger, like
right.
Every time he did something quote unquote nefarious, I couldn't take him seriously. So like, I didn't see him as that crazy evil lord that we've seen in a lot of movies.
Sure.
Only because his character was already set up as the comedic character.
Yeah.
well, that to me was the funny part, because at first, when he's just getting his rocks off from the
From the brain.
I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Excuse me? What the hell is going on?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh, okay, it makes sense. You're out of your goddamn mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it pieced together well enough for me, and because he is a comedic actor and the character's supposed to be maniacal, I just went for it.
Yeah. Yeah,
I was okay with it.
I mean, like, again, what I liked in the first one, like, I didn't mind Charlie Day because he got with Bern Gorman. So we had Dr. Herman Gottlieb and Dr. Newton Geisler.
Yeah.
And I liked the two of them together. They were the freaking frat. They were the straight man to the wacky man. But yet they were these scientists trying to figure out how to save the world. And I liked them together, and then when they separated them in this movie, I was like figuring, okay, so this movie's going to figure out how to get them together. Oh, but wait, no, it's not going to happen. And he becomes this overlord who wants to open up the gap again and destroy Earth. It's a B-movie trope. It's just that silly B-movie trope in a way to get that gap back open again. Albeit it was only for a couple of minutes on screen time. So, and then when he gets taken out at the end, I was like, what are they going to do with this character? Like, because he's doing something that's really inherently so bad. Like, if they extricate this being that's in him, this kaiju blood or whatever, the psychic connection that's in him, are they going to forgive him? Like, is he, like, what happens? I guess we'll have to wait until the next Pacific Rim.
That we will. As far as sort of fan feedback, they do appreciate that his character, he was chastised for the fact that his Mandarin wasn't up to par.
Yeah.
So, you know what? Good for your bad Mandarin.
But also, like, that was a running joke for his character throughout the whole movie as well. So I think, whatever. I could forget the bad Mandarin. Honestly, I could. Compared to him being an evil person that we're supposed to take seriously, I would take the bad Mandarin over that.
Well, what I'm saying is, as far as the bad Mandarin, it's just too many times in the past Americans have tried to do it, and it's been bad, and it's like, oh, your Mandarin's so good. Like, no, we're gonna just call you out. You speak shitty. So, okay, well, we'll return to that when we talk about the final battle of everything. But I want to get you guys' perspective on the Academy. And when we left, Marisa said this was kind of like the Power Rangers in a sense, and there's been comparisons made to that. And so I want to let you speak to that. What made you sort of pinpoint that initially?
Well, I think like the Power Rangers was like just the concept. For those who don't know, is they picked 5 random people to help save the world, and they all ended up being teenagers, and it felt like these teenagers were all just put together. We don't know how they all came together, but you can assume that there was like some recruitment type of program that they usually do for the military. But the fact that like we're training teenagers and they don't get along, some of them get along, some of them don't. They're forced to be together to save the world. So like there are some aspects of that. And then also, not to get ahead, but like even the humongous mega demon or mega monster, it felt like a megazord. Like when you take multiple different well, in robot and Power Rangers, it's like when you take a lot of your different Zords, which are all different animal robots that can fight individually, but when you put them together, you get a bigger monster that can fight awesomeness.
Right.
That's exactly what happened in this movie. You put them all together and you got a bigger creature to fight.
Right.
And so there was a lot of Power Ranger themes in this film as well.
So, one thing that I wanted to bring up too, I like the cast, right? And I liked the cadets. They weren't as characters. They weren't annoying. And what sort of kind of what it made me think of was Independence Day Resurgence. When we talked about that god-awful movie, one of the things that was god-awful about it was the young cast. They were just annoying as hell. And they weren't terribly good. And I had nothing to connect with on any one of them. And again, that's a B movie too, a bad B movie, a sequel. And I was thinking Pacific Rim Uprising, at least they wrote and came up with good characters that in the end I actually cared for. Whether or not they were going to make it through their battles, which I was hoping, I was rooting for them. And each one had their particular, let's say, arcs. And I really enjoyed watching them, as opposed to that other young cast, which I could have cared less about.
And also the thing, and not to keep making comparisons, but the Independence Resurgence, we still had that same storyline of, it's like, he's the son of the command major
who had the chip on his shoulder.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like, it's something we've seen time and time again.
Right.
Yeah, well, I could be like my father and make a big speech, but I'm not going to. And then he makes a speech. Which was ironic.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about what everyone wants to talk about. It's why we went to see the movie. At least I did, and if you guys didn't, then I don't know what you want to see. The action scenes. Mm-hmm. I thought overall, to me, they worked all really well. I loved whether we're in, where did we go to? The ice, when we went to the ice thing and they fought on the ice.
Right.
Where was that? I forget where that was. But anyway, whether it was that or the opening scenes, and certainly the last, as slightly convoluted as it was, of like, oh, this kaiju's just going to Mount Fuji to get minerals.
Right.
I was like, okay, well, it's... I loved the action set pieces in this, and I thought they all worked amazing, and I was just in awe of everything.
I really like the action. I think the action definitely holds up in this movie, and I like the action more, surprisingly so, in this movie compared to the first one, because I could actually see it. All the ones in Guillermo's movies were all at night. It was hard, and it was very stylistic, which was very done well in the first one. But like this one, you could see everything. It was during the day, and we'll get more into production of that too. But like you can see literally from like point A to point B to point C and all the scenes and how they got from here to there, and it was fun throughout. And they like every action scene got bigger than the last one, like a good action movie does.
Yeah, I did not like the action scenes. I really did. I disagree. Only I felt Pacific Rim, the stakes were higher. This one, we're going off of this premise that this guy's taken over by an overlord. I've got to open up the. It was that silly way of opening up the gap again, and how are we going to close it, and going up the mountain. But again, the way that they were filmed. Again, this was this one did feel a little more global as Pacific Rim was. So I did enjoy, well, and there was that twist too. I liked it when that rogue Jaeger came in Australia, right? That to me was a twist. It's like, oh, okay, what's going on here? And that set up a little bit of a mystery. Like, who's doing this? And you think it was that woman who might have set this up. You don't know what's going on, and they're not fighting kaiju. They're fighting themselves. Like, they're fighting something that should be fighting kaiju. I thought that scene, to me, that was my favorite. Because, again, you had the helicopter crash. You had so much going on, and you had this really strong Jaeger that they were trying to figure out how to put it down.
And not just the rogue Jaeger, all the rogue drones too, which were pretty cool because you're not expecting it. There's like, oh, we have hybrids. Crap.
Right.
How do we deal with them? And they're taking out all the good guys, and like you don't expect that because there was a whole issue beforehand that they did actually set up for us. Like, these drones will help us, where in the end it actually kicked them in the end.
Right.
So like I did like the irony of that, but you're not expecting actual working hybrids.
Yeah, you
only get one or the other.
And when they were showing it, like, and again, I thought this was going to be, the kaiju were back, and because you saw the thing in the water, but it was still blurry underwater. When it came up, wait, a robot? What, a Jaeger?
A Jaeger and a robot.
And I really liked that scene a lot and how it played out, and it was cool. A nice little simple twist. The kaiju weren't as let's just say developed, I felt, in this movie, because in Pacific Rim, don't forget, there was that one kaiju that could put out that, electromagnetic pulse, and they had higher stakes to go. But the kaiju in this movie were just like, Godzilla fighting Mothra or Gamera, and so I liked all our different Jaegers, and I'm glad Gypsy was back, because Gypsy's just cool. And I loved how each Jaeger, it was the same in the first Pacific Rim, had its own personality, not just by the two people who were driving the project or the Jaeger, but by its weaponry, by the way that it looked, the moves that it could make. And I liked how cinematically you're able to give this mechanical thing a personality and not have it be a transformer. The Transformers are self-aware, so they have personality. How do you make this inanimate object have a personality where you can see the differences on screen? And I think they did a good job in this one.
Even Scrapper was
Scrapper
had its own personality.
But only because of the person who driving and built it.
Who built it,
correct,
as far as Scrapper, but yeah, certainly B, who drove it at that point in time.
Also, like, Scrapper just moved differently compared to all the other Jaegers, because when we did all the production in the first one, like, these Jaegers are so big, it actually takes them a long time to make one giant movement.
Right.
And, like, Scrapper was so small that that's what I think people might think it feels like Transformers. Because it is a robot that moves really fast.
Right.
So, like, it looked different and it moved differently.
It was given a personality by its driver.
Yeah.
Well, as far as the differences between this one and the first one, just the aspect ratio itself, they switched it up to a far more widescreen version, a 2.4 to 1, which comparatively, the first one was 1.85 to 1. And the reason for that, when you're they understood while Guillermo made the decision. When you're talking about seeing the height of these things, well, you need a little more headroom rather than width. And so, they were aware of that, but they took that as a challenge of, okay, let's figure out still how to have the scale within the frame while having more on the width rather than the height.
Right.
And as far as achieving that, action wise, I thought it was really well done, and it gave me a full scope of everything. I love seeing the buildings to the left or right, or the mountains and so forth.
The buildings and being, as you said too, filming in daylight brought a lot more scale to it. So particularly if you're going to go wider. So how do you showcase height? Well, when you're going wider, well, put scale into it. Put in some buildings. Like that's how they did it in the Godzilla movies. Well, we're gonna have the man in the rubber suit. Let's put in the buildings. We're gonna make the buildings a little bit smaller. He's got to look big and threatening. And being this one was mostly in the daytime, it makes sense how it was shot. And going wider, it makes it more. Well, it brings a new scope, which is what that is, scope and epicness.
Yeah, it was definitely epic on screen, and I just feel bad for all the people that had to deal with all these robots and Jaegers fighting each other. Like, all the buildings they destroyed. They demolished Sydney. And Mount Fiji, were there any buildings left over when they went to Mount Fiji? Probably not. No. But, you definitely got the scopes of all the different big cities, and I like that.
Yeah, I think Tokyo took its lumps.
Yeah.
Again.
I mean, but they
it was evacuated, right? They said that. So
no, it was evacuated, but there's a lot of rebuild that's gonna.
Yeah, there was a lot of rebuilding.
Oh well, what are you gonna do with those damn kaiju?
Those kaiju.
The other aspect of it that I appreciate, when you talk about a movie like this, the symbiosis between production and post-production, they just have to be in sync, otherwise it doesn't work.
Sure.
From one to the other and back. And what I appreciate, something like this, you kind of get to be a kid again, and they had all the action figures and so forth, and just mapping this whole thing out. And one of the things I do appreciate, when you talk about, I think the helicopter scene, as far as action and motion, is the most well done. And what I appreciate as far as the way they mapped all this out, they wanted to do it from a narrative perspective first and foremost, rather than, okay, what would be cool to see, much like kind of what I think is what Transformers tries to do first and foremost. Sorry, Transformers. Sorry for people that like Transformers.
I'm not offended. I mean, I get it. But again, what made that particular scene for me, made it work, at least for me, was to the editing, because we saw the perspective. So we got to see from inside the helicopter and her looking at the face of the Jaeger, knowing that her brother was there. Then we cut to him seeing his sister and the outreached arm and hand trying to catch her. It was edited really well to an emotional, it had an emotional beat to it. It was done in slow motion, which it was an annoying slow motion. You're able to see what was going on. And the look, touching being trapped in that helicopter, knowing that she's going to go down. Yeah, it was a decent emotional beat that you don't always get in these movies. And I think that's why it just resonated, and I felt it was the best action scene, just from performance, from a technical standpoint, and from an editing standpoint, and direction standpoint, knowing what perspective we were getting as this was all happening. It was just done very well.
Mm-hmm. I agree, and then the whole death scene is probably the most humane scene out of all the actions. You got that moment where it actually evoked an emotion, okay? And that's why I felt like this movie was lighter than the first one, because the first one, the best way that the pilots connected was through emotional memories.
Right.
And we got that every single time. And just with the cinematography in the first one, you saw all of Mako's background when she first, when she was a kid, first got attacked by the monsters, and demolished her family and her life, and so there was an emotional grounding of a storyline.
Sure.
And like this was probably the most emotional moment in the movie.
Right.
For
I
this
agree.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as far as the final scene, what made that work, we kind of pared down the characters a lot,
Yes.
quite literally. But Amora and Jake, I appreciated their bond, and as much as Eastwood and Jake were able to reconnect, the fact that you could see like Jake was going to try to do this Jaeger thing all by himself again, but it's like, nope, I'm gonna help you, and that part of it worked, and the only thing being of it is I think they were separated for far too long in the movie.
Yeah.
They had their moments, but if they kind of developed that a little bit more, then I think it would even had a bigger impact, similar to the earlier Australia scene.
Yeah, and I was wondering how soon they were gonna it's like, okay, they're setting this up because there's a brother sisterly kind of relationship, right, between Jake and Amara, I felt. And I was like, okay, how are they going to how are we gonna figure this out with Scott Eastwood's character? Because somehow they got to get that girl into the Jaeger to fight. So and they didn't kill him off, thankfully. None of the cadets.
I think one of them,
Did one of
died.
them? I forget which one now.
the poor one, that died.
Poor one. The poor
The
one.
sad soul.
Oh, was it the one that got injured when they were? Okay, so they could have easily gotten rid of the Eastwood character, but they didn't. But I like how
He had a good moment.
we had a good moment. Get him out, bring him on in, and then you're off to the races. And these two are compatible, and again, it strengthened that bond because I really felt that there was a chemistry between those two actors. I think that there was definitely that brotherly sister, that brother sister thing going on. And then when they defeated the kaiju, I love the whole banter on the snow. Oh, it's snowing out. That's what you're looking at when there's a thing over there. She goes, yeah, I've never seen snow before. And they got a snowball. I like that. It was good banter.
And they didn't forget about Lambert, right?
Yes.
You kind of think, oh, okay, everything's over, but then boom, there he is, ready to hit Charlie Day.
Yep.
Yeah, that was a great moment, and I liked that that was in a way the most humane way to take down the quote unquote evil baddie in this movie is just a simple punch from human to human, not from monster to monster. I did like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what I appreciate is, as far as whatever, there was a lot of companies that went into this, whether it was just even the previs, let alone the actual Jaegers, but there was a sentiment very much so of, listen, we got the budget, and we know it's a pretty tight budget, but we're going to stretch it as far as we can. We're going to use up every penny and do what we need to do. And I really can see this. I applaud them, as you guys said, having daylight, because so many movies that rely on visual effects, they'll hide it behind just darkness and shadows because that seems easier. And so to have the gumption to just go pretty much almost full daylight, I like that because I could, as Marisa pointed out, I could see, I could visualize it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also you just get a visual scope of where you are in the fight. Because there was a moment when they were at Mount Fuji and destroying all the buildings where there's this one long tracking shot and it's going from Jaeger to Jaeger here and there. But you literally got a scope of where everyone physically is.
True.
And just the distance between them and how close this fight was. And I did like that because I feel in the first Pacific Rim, they were miles apart from each other. But they would run towards each other just for one or two hits. But it gave it more spread throughout each fight. And this one was really up close and personal.
Yeah, and they did make it a point. This is 10 years after Pacific Rim, and the design of the Jaeger has changed somewhat. They're more agile. They can run a little bit faster. They can do more things, so to speak. So yeah, I bought all into that and being able to see these things and how they worked. It was as fun as learning about what Jaegers can do, from the first Pacific Rim. once you understand the link and the connection, then you buy into it going into this next story. So you don't get that it's not like a re-education in a sense. You're already into it, and then you get this one Jaeger that needs 3 people to pilot. And that was a pretty cool Jaeger too.
I like that. There were some callback moments to the first one that had to
Absolutely.
re-educate the audience. Like, oh yeah, neural handshake, we got it.
Yeah.
Like, I think we only got 1, maybe 2 in this, and then the whole drifting. I was like, oh yeah, there is an actual term for this when they're drifting mentally compatible. Like,
Sure.
and I like that. But even though if you're only seeing the second movie before you saw the first one, you can still understand what they're doing.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So in a way, this movie still is self-contained.
It's very self-contained. I mean, and it does make a point. It says this takes place 10 years after. If you never saw Pacific Rim, you're put right into the story. It's easy to understand. Just because they're bringing. I mean, let's look at it. There are only technically 3 characters who were in the original that come back for this one, right?
They did want Charlie Hunnam originally, but he couldn't because of other scheduling conflicts.
Yeah. And I was wondering, how are they going to write him out? Because he was integral. You figured he'd be back.
Well, there was an actual original script that had his character come back, but because Charlie Hunnam took on another passion project too, they wrote another script that ended up being this one.
Yeah, and I sort of kind of get that Nate might have been that Charlie Hunnam character. Like, and they just reworked him to be Nate instead of
Possibly. I'd be interested to see.
Also, Stephen DeKnight did say that there is a version out there in the world of he has a good moment that's already written out that introduces Charlie Hunnam's character back into the quote-unquote franchise. Yeah. So they're already thinking and planning on his return.
And the thing is, too, I liked Scott Eastwood. But man, he won the. I mean, he looks so much like his
father.
It's sickening. Like, it's like you
imagine that, a son who looks like his father,
but so much like his dad. Like, from a profile, they could use him to do that digital work to replace. Like, from a profile standard, and from even the way he scowls and squints, it's like. You suck. Like it's like really like yes, there are family resemblances all over, right? I mean, but this one is almost like he was almost a clone.
So you're saying you're jealous?
Yeah, jealous. Jesus Christ, and he's got this. He's getting a decent career. He's not. And again, I wonder. Is he fallen under the shadow of his dad? I don't know, probably to some extent, but he's still mapping out his own career. He's doing pretty good. I liked him in this movie. It's fun to watch. It's like, hey, more Eastwood. Okay.
What did you guys think of the score on this?
I mean, it was fun. It was bombastic at some points, mostly during the fighting. But it's not as, admittedly, it's not as memorable as the first soundtrack. But we've talked about action movies when the music is like way too in
your face.
Yes, I mean Hans Zimmer does that every once in a while, but like I liked it because it was still fun. It's still like transformative in a way, but like it's memorable in some points. I think the most I remembered it was Mount Fiji, when all the buildings are literally getting collapsed and you just hear music.
Yeah, well, I think this one, and again, I haven't listened to the original Pacific Rim score in a while, but this one relied a lot on electric. It was that blending of orchestra with a lot of electronic stuff. That's what I noticed on this one, and maybe it was just me. It wasn't until like towards the end that you had the Pacific Rim Jaeger key, the refrain, the da 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 da, which was the heroic theme in the original one. They didn't overuse it. Well, they barely used it. I felt I didn't really hear it until the end credits a lot. So, how about you?
It's tough to compare because I haven't heard the old one and since the old one really. But as far as it working for the movie, I thought it worked well, and just in general the mixing of everything. When we talk about that scale, sound had a very big part to do with it. Whether it was, feeling the air vibrations of something falling down, something moving, something cracking on ice, or even on just gravel. So it all played into it, and very well done as far as Foley and the music, and it had a rhythm that I appreciated.
Yeah.
And it made my heart. I'm more aware now of my breathing in movies, and I was definitely tense during the action scenes.
Well, the sound design and editing were fantastic. I saw this in an XD screen, which is a premium large format screen, and it had the 11 speakers on the ceiling, and then you're surrounded by the speakers. That brought everything to life, very well, particularly for this movie. This is a movie, again, I will argue, it's not meant to be watched on an iPad, unless it's a multiple viewing and you own it. But if you're really going to get into this kind of a movie, you have to see this at a movie theater to get that experience. Mm-hmm. That rumble in your stomach when they're fighting and... the roar of the kaiju. That's why the movies exist, is to have that. And I get if I'm gonna see it for a fourth time, a third time, if I'm on a plane, this works fine. But that movie was not made for this screen, nor that screen.
As he points to an iPhone.
An iPhone, yes.
Speaking of the theater experience, let's talk pure numbers as far as box office. Finally, a movie dethroned the behemoth that was Black Panther, although it came in second, right?
6 weeks after.
6 weeks after.
Right.
Other movies that came out that weekend: Sherlock Gnomes, Unsane, Paul the Apostle, and Midnight Sun. So not too much competition there. The only sort of thing that's so much similar is Tomb Raider, although it's still
It's a different
action-y,
kind of
but
action film.
yeah. But overall, it grossed. Opening weekend, it ended up with where is it?
28.1.
28.1, which they predicted anywhere between 22 and 29. So right in that range. Overall, though, as you pointed out at the beginning, it was really more about the foreign box office.
Yeah.
And it always is going to be.
It's going to kill internationally, and it's a global themed movie. We have different nationalities in the cast and the crew alone just making this movie, and you see like Japan coming together with the Americans, Germany coming all together. It's like all these different countries are literally unifying itself to fight as a global epic, and I'm glad because kaijus are bigger in Asia than they are America.
Absolutely.
You always see them. Hello Godzilla. So it makes sense it would be bigger internationally.
Yeah, and I think too, it's what I said last week when we were talking Tomb Raider. I think we should slowly start changing the mindset of just domestic, okay? Because if you do that, you're going to be very depressed. As a business and as how the news pushes it out, because you'll look at it and say Pacific Rim Uprising has only made $36.4 million thus far as of today, right? That's a very depressing number, particularly since you put in $150 million in a production, right? But when you add in that global, that foreign, thus far, it's done $122.4 million globally, that international business, right? So all in, we're at 158 globally. That's not a bad number. That's not terrible, and it just really proves that movies are appreciated and enjoyed on a global scale. I do believe it's an amazing import that we have to give to audiences all around the world, that people appreciate what we can release here from the States, and people like it. I mean, that's 77% of the gross. 77. That's a big chunk. So if we start to change the mindset a little bit and we get out of this domestic, maybe we can look more positively as to how a movie can perform and who the movie is actually really entertaining. Over here, people want to become cynical about going to the movies. And that's what you read about in The Hollywood Reporter, in Deadline, in Variety. You read about box office numbers, and people are changing because they're so fragmented. But internationally, there's hope. They're not as fragmented as we are. Granted, some companies may not have the technology, but certainly China or Japan does, right? Mm-hmm. So I just like to start, I'm looking more at those international numbers, trying to find the positive. Like, granted, 34 here is not great, or 36, but I think globally, that's not bad. It's on its way.
For me, I'm an idealist, and I would like to see both. You know, I'm glad for the international, but at the same time, I'd like to see a reflection of that in the U.S.
I would love to too, Phil. You know, there's no bigger champion for the movie-going experience. You know, and I would love to see people like spread their wings and maybe not go to, like, you're always going to go to superhero movies, but there's more out there. And those movies, guess what? They're fun. Yeah. Maybe they don't have all your superheroes in there, and I'm not going to say I'm going to hate Infinity War. I'll probably love it, but there are other fun movies to go to as well. Spread your wings, open up your mind, just go have a good time.
And I think also that could be a factor what domestic may not be doing as well is just franchise fatigue. We had 5, 6 Transformers now, I don't know how many, and like so many Marvel movies. It's just, this honestly feels just like another action movie that feels like they only made just for money. Unfortunately, sometimes I feel like watching this, I was like, yeah, this is just another action movie to get people to buy box office tickets.
But any sequel is made to make more money. When you look at a sequel, you know, and I got nothing against, you know, the Marvel movies. They've done a fantastic job, right? But there's more out there than the superhero movie. We talked about it with Tomb Raider. I'm talking about it with Pacific Rim, Uprising. I'll talk about it in depth some more with Ready Player One. Again, not a superhero movie, but there is fun to be had if you go to the movies and just not it being a superhero movie. Granted, they make a ton of money, but let's not be focused on movies that make just $1 billion. Because I know dollar signs in this business. I get it. But we should also focus on these. Well, it's hard to call this a mid-movie when it costs $150 million, but it's not a superhero movie. And let's focus what it does.
If it is a B movie, then it's very apropos that its cinema score is also a B. So, there you have it. It is indeed a B movie.
Great segue. I love that.
So, and, you know, I would give it a B plus. Well, for what it is, for what it's trying to achieve, I take things for what they are, and I try not to judge it against anything else. I would say it's more of a B plus. You know,
B plus.
Yeah,
sure.
Anyway, I would like to see. I think they did set up a fun little ending to it, and they're, you know, if they do succeed with this one, there of course will be the third one where we go into the monster verse, and I think that could be a lot of fun. And I you know, whether it is, I'm hoping only for a trilogy. I just want to see that third one, which I know if we're gonna make, going back to the Marisa comparison, and it's an Independence Day resurgence, they kind of did that of like, now we're coming at you. Mm-hmm. But hey,
we're never, thankfully,
like,
I don't think
they go
get
into
that one.
the gap. That would be fun.
I would much rather see the Pacific Rim third movie than I would an Independence Day third movie after that god-awful excuse of a sequel.
I don't disagree. Well, you might at home, you might disagree or agree with us. Either way, please do comment. Let us know what your opinion is on this movie. After all, we get the conversation going, but by no means is it over. That's the beauty of doing so many movies. The conversation just continues and continues. And even for all the 400 movies we've covered, we sometimes go back into the comments as you guys see them years later or whatever. you guys find us and enjoy our episodes. So
And watch our interview. We had a great interview.
Absolutely. Nick
with
Tarabay.
Nick Tarabay.
Absolutely. In the meantime, unfortunately, there's no cake. There's no anything special beyond just us doing our amazing show as we do. But this has been our 400th.
Does this mean we go into syndication?
I think we've already been in syndication
fair
on
enough.
iTunes.
Fair enough.
In the meantime, you can show your support and thanks for 400 to @Serafini TV for Marisa,
Right.
@DMovies1701 for Demetri.
Please do. Please support me on Twitter.
That, believe it or not, that is not the year he was born.
You son of a bitch.
And I'm @PhilSvitek. Thank you guys as always for joining us. Shout out to Bonjour Julia in the booth for engineering us, and
400.
to another 400 to go. After that, I retire. Bye.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire Popcorn Talk Network, we would like to thank you for tuning in. For questions or comments, be sure to visit popcorntalk.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of the Popcorn Talk Network.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.